It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Tel Aviv. Israel remembers those killed and taken hostage in the October the 7th attacks 2 years on. In Gaza, the Israeli assault sparked on this day 2 years ago continues. President Trump says a deal at peace talks is close. In the UK, anger as pro-Palestinian protesters reject calls from the Prime Minister to call off today's demonstrations.
We can't even get a break on that one day to actually grieve and process our feelings, and it's actually really hurtful.
Also ahead on Sky News at 10 tonight. As 20 Conservative councillors defect to Reform, the Tory leader tells Sky News she won't do an election deal with Nigel Farage.
It's quite clear that if people don't know what you stand for and you're standing for having a pact, why would they vote for you?
Plus, regulators say millions of motorists should get hundreds of pounds in compensation over unfair car finance deals. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Tel Aviv. Events have been taking place throughout the day here in Israel to mark the second anniversary of the attacks carried out by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023. 1,200 Israelis were killed that day and more than 250 others taken across the border into Gaza and held hostage. Since then, aside from a brief ceasefire, Israel has attacked Gaza in its efforts to defeat Hamas, resulting in the deaths of more than 67,000 Palestinians, according to officials in the territory. As the fighting continues, President Trump again insisted tonight that there's a real chance of a deal from ceasefire negotiations underway in Egypt. We'll assess that in a moment. But first, our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports on the devastating impact of this conflict on people in both Israel and in Gaza.
It is a place of grief and memory. The photos of those murdered at the Nova Festival dot the area where the gatherers were dancing on the morning of the attack. For the families of those killed, the suffering's endless. Every day, they've had to relive the trauma. Mikhail Bitten's daughter died in the arms of her fiancé. They tried to escape as Hamas gunmen rampaged through the area.
After they found them together, dead, Eliran covered her. They were hugging each other and dead. And instead of taking them to the wedding, we took them to the cemetery together and we buried them together at home. At the new home. That's the love story.
Every picture here tells a story of a life cut short. 3 members of the Rahum family were killed that day, including 28-year-old Nitzan, who was 4 months pregnant.
Everything is more complex, and I don't really know how to feel about this day, because every day we feel the loss, the pain.
October the 7th is the deadliest day in the country's history, and one that's left deep scars that have not healed. This has been a painful day of remembrance for Israel and Israelis as they reflect on the lives destroyed in the October the 7th massacre and the sense of security that was shattered. But it's also the second anniversary of the military campaign that followed, and the battle, the fighting inside Gaza, is still raging. We can see massive plumes of smoke on the horizon from explosions, and much of the enclave lies in ruins. The ferocity of Israel's response has been brutal. Gaza's been pounded for the last 24 months, leading to accusations that Israel is committing genocide. It denies those allegations, but the suffering of the population is clear. The conflict has been a catastrophe for the Palestinian people, whose history is already a story of sorrow and loss.
My whole life has changed. The war imposed on us is utterly unequal and unjust, with tons of explosives dropped on unarmed people with no means of defense. The media may frame it as a war against Hamas, but in truth, it is being waged against the Palestinian people.
Negotiations to end the war and bring back the hostages continue, but the consequences of October the 7th remain unresolved. It exposed deep fault lines and reshaped regional politics. 2 years on, the question is, will it open a path to peace or deepen the distrust that's kept this conflict burning for decades? Alex Rossi, Sky News, Southern Israel.
Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us live from Jerusalem. And Adam, it's difficult to believe that it's been 2 years since October the 7th. And just following on from what Alex was saying there in his piece, so much has happened in this region, so much has changed, not just the lives of Israelis and Palestinians, but beyond, across the region.
Yeah, October the 7th is an incredibly consequential action. And certainly here in Israel, it dominates public life. As you go around this country, you see yellow ribbons, you see slogans, bring them home, you see photos of the hostages. It's hard for many people to move on. I was in a kibbutz recently near Odz, and there the buildings are still standing as they were. They're still charred. There are bullet holes everywhere. I saw blood still on the floor. And it's almost as if symbolically that kibbutz is, as it was, almost in aspect as a reflection of this country that is still traumatized, still held by the repercussions of October the 7th. And so they ripple through the whole region, through Gaza, where such an astonishing number of people have been killed by the military reprisals, and through the entire Middle East, which is still grappling with the after effects of the fluctuations in the peace that so many want, but which has been hugely disrupted by October 7th.
Yeah, and at different twists and turns and points, there has been hope that some kind of ceasefire or peace deal could have been reached. But we're now at this pivotal moment where it seems the US president is seeing only the yeses from both sides, even though so many people are saying both sides have said yes, but Donald Trump wants a deal by the end of this week.
Yeah, I think a fully fleshed out deal by the end of this week is a hugely optimistic ambition, but it comes from a president whose entire foreign policy framework is shrouded in, well, let's just hope for the best. But what he has done, because of the power of his office, is bring people together with an ambition. And I think partly that is driven by exhaustion. The Israeli military tell me that they have had enough. Clearly, the people of Gaza, who've lost 67,000 to this military action, have had enough. The Israeli public want this war over. And so these very significant players, possibly the man who is probably now the head of Hamas, is there at Sharm el-Sheikh. A big delegation from Israel, from Arab states. Steve Witkoff, the American negotiator, is arriving just now in the area. The Qatari Prime Minister will be arriving tomorrow. There's a delegation from Turkey. All of this power allows the nations to look into each other's eyes. You know, when you are together in person, you can make deals a lot quicker. The problem is that the red lines are very, very red. Hamas wants Israel to pull out entirely when it hands over the hostages. It also wants Palestinians to have a big say in the future governance of the Gaza Strip. Israel doesn't trust Hamas, and by the way, Hamas doesn't trust Israel. They want entirely different timings. They don't want Palestinian self-determination. Those are huge, yawning gaps. My understanding is that there are 3 stages. Firstly, the framing. Just how will the talks be done? That's been achieved. The second one is what I'm told is the less contentious issues. That is where progress is being made. Stage 3 are the difficult things. Either they're pushed into the long grass and everyone knows that will come back to haunt the region again, or they are addressed with the risk that a deal fails. There is a huge amount on the table, and mere optimism won't get us across the line.
No, not at all. Adam, thank you so much for all of your analysis there this evening. Now, in the UK, pro-Palestinian protesters defied calls from the Prime Minister to cancel demonstrations on the anniversary of the Hamas attack. A number of protests were held across the country, including in London, Manchester and Sheffield. Sir Keir Starmer had said joining a march today would be un-British. Our Communities correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
October the 7th in London. A chant viewed by many as a highly offensive anti-Semitic call for the destruction of Israel. To these protesters, a legitimate call for a free Palestine. Demos went ahead despite the Prime Minister urging people not to take part on the anniversary of the Hamas attack that killed around 1,200 people. Keir Starmer said it was un-British to have so little respect.
The Prime Minister suggests it's un-British to be at this protest on October the 7th. Do you agree with him?
I don't agree with him because it's not un-British to exercise our right to protest, our freedom of expression.
Is this disrespectful, though, to people mourning the loss of life on October the 7th 2 years ago?
It's not disrespectful. It's not a denial of the Holocaust, not a denial of Jewish identity.
Do you condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th?
I don't care for that question.
This man appeared to be an organiser but didn't want to give us his name.
Are you an organiser?
Thank you for asking. You want to know what I think? Yeah. I think the Prime Minister is disrespectful to the thousands of Palestinians who are killed every single day in Gaza. That's what I think. We love Jewish people. I love Jewish people. We hate Zionists. The war could end today, but Hamas have refused.
This Jewish man came here to share his anger. He told me he feels unsafe in London at the moment.
The war could stop. Un-British behaviour, as Keir Starmer very Britishly puts it. Okay, these people should be under arrest for incitement. They could do this October 5th, October 6th, October 8th, October 9th. In fact, they probably are, and they pretty much have done every day, just as they did on October 7th, 2023. Okay, and to do this today is mere incitement. But Sky have also been inciting. Okay, and you only have permission to publish this if you include that.
There was hostility towards the media on both sides.
Please don't get in the faces of protesters.
But they're on a public street in London.
It's common decency, don't get in their face.
So the Prime Minister says that this shows a lack of respect and is un-British. Do you agree with him?
I've said we're not going to give comment to Zionists.
You're disgusting.
I think condoning genocide is disgusting.
This video from North London was circulating on social media. A woman cutting down ribbons put up for the Israelis still being held hostage in Gaza.
These protests are now raising serious questions. Where is the line between legitimate demonstration over the war in Gaza and anti-Semitism? And what is acceptable on the streets of Britain?
If this is un-British, what can the British government do about it? Becky Johnson, Sky News, Central London.
Well, relatives of those injured in the Manchester synagogue attack have also questioned why demonstrations needed to happen in the UK today. Yoni Finlay was wounded in Thursday's attack. His ex-wife says he now feels so unsafe he no longer wants to live in the UK. Sky's Katie Barnfield has more.
Injured, protecting others. Yoni Finlay was struck by a police bullet while barricading the doors of the Heaton Park synagogue during last week's terror attack. His ex-wife and the mother of his children says he now feels so unsafe he wants to leave.
Yoni's expressed to me that he definitely no longer feels safe in this country and is beginning to question his future here. When I went to see him in the hospital, I spoke to him about some of the anti-Semitism we'd faced personally. We've been shouted at in our own home. My kids have been shouted at. My son, who's 16, his biggest fear is anybody finding out he's Jewish.
On the day of the attack, Yoni spent 7 hours in surgery. Naomi says he's in severe pain, but is now stable and recovering. He was hit as police shot and killed the attacker, Jihad al-Shami, outside the synagogue doors. Yoni's family were just a few doors away when the attack began.
The second I heard something, I knew. I knew what it was.
When did you find out that Yoni was involved?
We found out from a family member who was in the synagogue, they came to tell us that he'd been injured and taken straight to hospital. It was really difficult for the kids. I feel like the beginning of the day before that, where we're just on the streets, just asking anyone, have you seen him, have you seen him, have you seen him, was definitely the hardest part.
2 years to the day from the October 7th terror attack in Israel, pro-Palestine marches are being organised across the country, including in Manchester. Naomi feels the demonstrations are disrespectful to victims of the synagogue attack.
Even today, there's protests going on one of the saddest days for Jewish people worldwide. And I feel like we can't even get a break on that one day to actually grieve and process our feelings. And it's actually really hurtful.
Although she's praised the police response since the attack, Naomi worries for her and Yoni's children what will happen when the attention dies down.
We worry that in a few weeks, when all this simmers down, are we still going to feel reassured? Are we still going to be protected? You know, who's going to look after our kids when they're in school? Who's going to look after us when we go pray in the synagogue? You know, who's going to protect us?
Katie Barnfield, Sky News in Manchester.
Well, an emotionally charged day, not just here in Israel, but in Western capitals around the world, where some places have had protests, others haven't. But what is clear from both sides, whether it's Palestinians in Gaza or those who are protesting in support of Palestinians or Israelis here marking October the 7th, people on both sides want to see this conflict come to an end. They want to see the hostages being returned. They want to see the war that is being conducted and prosecuted in Gaza to come to an end. That is why these talks taking place in Egypt are so crucial. And more than anyone, perhaps, it's the US president who is now putting so much pressure on both sides to come to some kind of an agreement. For now, we will hand back to you in London, Anna, and end our evening's coverage of the October 7th commemorations.
Yalda, live for us there in Tel Aviv. Thank you. We're back here now, and the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has told Sky News that she will not enter into an election pact with Reform UK. The Tories' conference in Manchester has been dominated by questions of collaboration with Nigel Farage's party, with 20 Conservative councillors defecting today. Kemi Badenoch told our political editor, Beth Rigby, that she wanted to make it clear what her party stood for, and that did not include election deals.
A leader not hiding from the challenges ahead.
Hi, Beth. It's nice to see you.
Kemi Badenoch trying to get onto the front foot. But there's one party and one politician dominating conversations here in Manchester. Do you admire Nigel Farage as a politician?
On what basis?
Do you admire him?
I don't understand your question.
Well, it's just an open question. What do you think of him?
Why aren't you asking if I admire Keir Starmer or Ed Davey?
Well, I asked Keir Starmer about whether he admired Nigel Farage
I know, and I think
well.
it's very interesting that a lot of the media in Westminster is very interested about asking about Nigel Farage. I'm not interested in Nigel Farage. I'm interested in the Conservative
other parties
Party.
They're not interested in you.
Well,
you
yes,
weren't
they
even
are.
name-checked in their
Yes, because of course, because they would rather be fighting him.
What,
but
do
what
you
I'm
admire
saying,
him? What do you think of him?
I'm not interested in talking
You're
about
not
Nigel
interested
Farage.
in him.
I just think that your viewers want to know what I'm offering. I'm not offering Nigel Farage. I'm offering authentic conservatism, and that is stronger economy, stronger borders.
The Prime
no one
Minister
else
said
can
that he
deliver it.
thought Nigel Farage was a formidable politician. He didn't mind that question. Do you think he's formidable?
Well, I don't mind you asking me questions about what I'm here to talk about.
Okay.
I think that the important thing is that people know that we're a strong team. He's a one-man band.
Since the election reform has become the party of the right, miles ahead of you, your MP Andrew Rosendale says he's going to lose his Romford seat to Reform and you need to work together to defeat Labour. Is he right?
Reform is not the party of the right. They want more welfare spending.
He says you need to work together.
They want more welfare spending. They want nationalisation.
He says you need to work together.
You
don't agree.
If I may, those are not policies that we support.
Okay.
How can you vote Conservative and get nationalisation? We need people to understand what voting Conservative is for.
Okay.
And right now, that is the job that I'm doing.
No deal.
A stronger economy, stronger borders. I've always said that.
Robert Jenrick hasn't ruled it out. Rather, he said it's not a priority. Isn't that a sensible approach?
It is important that people know what we stand for. Robert Jenrick is not the leader of the Conservative Party.
They're wrong and you're right.
I think that's pretty obvious, Beth.
But the party faithful losing faith in her after a dismal first year. In the 11 months since you've become party leader, the Conservatives have dropped in the polls from 26% to 17%. You've lost 700 council seats, 16 councils, 18 senior Tories have defected. Your personal poll ratings are at -47. How does that make you feel?
So I don't let these things distract me.
But does it make you feel frustrated? Does it make you feel worried? Does it make you feel more determined?
It is. I am absolutely determined to get our party out of this. But I always said that things would get worse before they got better.
So how long are you giving yourself to turn this around?
So I was elected to change the party. That is what I'm doing. And I told people we weren't going to rush out with announcements.
When's it going to get better?
What I want people to know is that these things take time.
Half of your members don't think you're the right person to lead them into the next election.
I simply don't believe that. That's not what's happening at the conference. That's what people told me, that I wasn't going to win the leadership contest, and I did win.
So they're wrong.
And the fact is, Beth, 4 years ago, Keir Starmer had his worst election results ever, and people were asking these questions. He's Prime Minister now.
Badenoch trying to brush off questions about her leadership, but around this conference, her future is the constant question for a political party deserted with a leader failing to make her mark. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins us now from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. And John, a leader insisting there that she is in charge.
Well, she'll make a fight back as she closes this conference. The slogans for this conference are, on the front of the guide, stronger economy, stronger borders. Now, you'll recall that in her speech opening the conference, she talked about stronger borders with the controversial plans for getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights and ditching the court, Britain's membership of the court, and also plans to deport 150,000 migrants a year. The speech closing conference is all going to be about a stronger economy. She's going to concentrate on that. Say the Tories are the only party that can be trusted to get the economy back on track. She's going to talk about a golden rule the Tories would bring in, which would mean that at least half money saved in savings would go either on would go on paying off the deficit. The other half would go on tax cuts or boosting growth, spending to boost growth. So, but while she tries to rally the troops really after a dreadful week, as Beth has been explaining, earlier the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, seen very much as the leader in waiting, well, he was involved in a pretty ugly row over a video in which he said there were no white people in Handsworth in Birmingham. He was attacked and accused of racism by the Labour mayor of the West Midlands, but he was unapologetic, defiant even, stood by his remarks, and he gave a speech which was barnstorming, it was witty, it was energetic, and he got a great ovation, piling pressure on Kemi Badenoch to deliver as she makes her speech to close the conference. So it's all about Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. Mr. Jenrick has done very well with his big speech here and seen off his critics. Kemi Badenoch now, she'll concentrate on the economy and in her pitch to her members here and indeed the voters.
More from there tomorrow. John, thank you. The Director of Public Prosecution says that a high-profile spying case collapsed because government officials had not described China a threat to national security. Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry had both denied accusations of providing information to Beijing. The case against them was dropped last month. But let's go live to Westminster and our political correspondent Liz Bates. And there's a rare intervention today, then, from the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Oh, very surprising intervention from the DPP, Stephen Parkinson. It relates to, as you say, these two individuals, Christopher Berry, who was at the time a teacher, Christopher Cash, who was at the time a parliamentary researcher for Conservative MP Alicia Cairns. They are accused of spying for China in a period that fell between 2021 and 2023. They were arrested. The case against them was being put together, but then suddenly last month it was dropped by the CPS. their explanation was that they simply did not have enough evidence to prove the case. At the time, the government considered China a threat to the national security of the UK. Now, the allegation since that time, since the case was dropped, against the government has been that they in some way intervened, and the suggestion was that they intervened because this would be a very difficult case in terms of their relationship, trading, diplomatic relationship with China. Now, the government has strongly, vehemently denied that, and in doing so, I think really has passed the blame back to the CPS for just simply not having enough evidence to get this case over the line. And I think that is what has led to this quite frustrated, potentially quite angry intervention from the DPP tonight. Let me just read you an extract of the letter that he sent to two chairs of select committees, the Justice Committee and the Home Affairs Committee. These are some extracts from it. He says, government briefings have been provided commenting on the evidential situation. Given this unusual circumstance, I consider that I am now able to provide further information to contextualise the position. Efforts to obtain that evidence, he says, were made over many months, but notwithstanding the fact that further witness statements were provided, none of these stated that at the time of the offence, China represented a threat to national security. So that is the head of the CPS saying, we asked the government to provide the evidence that we needed to continue with this case, and in the end, we had to give up because they simply were not forthcoming with it. He is firmly passing the blame back onto the government. Now, the Prime Minister has responded to this. He was on a plane to India when he was asked about this. He says, let me just be really clear about this. What matters is what the designation was in 2023. That's what the government's approach to China was in 2023. Did they consider it then to be a threat to UK national security? Because that's when the offence was committed and that's when the relevant period was. Therefore, statements were drawn up at the time according to the then government policy, and they haven't been changed in relation to it. That was the position then. That is the Prime Minister saying it is the previous government's policy towards China that is at fault in all of this, and basically it is not this government's fault. So look, this evening there's a lot of finger pointing on a Prime Minister at odds with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and in the centre of all this, two men accused of spying for China currently off the hook.
Liz, thank you. The finance regulator says millions of motorists who were treated unfairly when signing up to car finance schemes should receive hundreds of pounds in compensation. The Financial Conduct Authority says customers hadn't been told properly about the amount of commission that dealers were getting between 2007 and last year. Well, let's bring in our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, who's here with me now. So good for customers, not for banks, but certainly at the lower end of expectations.
Yeah, it's good for customers, but it's not as good as it could have been, or at least as good as they were hoping it might be. It's the compensation figure that's come out. It's 11 billion. Some of that is admin costs. So it's more like sort of 8.7 billion, I think, in the end. And as I said, that's kind of on the lower end of the estimate. Some of the early estimates suggested it could be 9 to 18 billion pounds. But this is quite a long-running saga. It's legally knotty. It's been in and out of the courts. But I think it's worth reflecting just in its simplest form what this actually relates to. And it's all about people who bought cars on finance. So a broker will have sold them a car, but also arranged a loan for them. And they ended up paying more in interest than they should have done because those brokers behind the scenes were being incentivised by the banks to hook them onto a higher interest rate. So the higher the interest rate, the higher the commission. And back in 2021, the FCA banned this practice. They're known as discretionary commission arrangements, or DCAs for short. And in the meantime, we've had a lot of kind of picking over the kind of underbelly of these commission arrangements, all types of commission arrangements, hidden commissions. It's been in and out of the courts, as I mentioned. And now we're at a point where the FCA is ready to sort of design a redress scheme for all of those people who were affected, a compensation package. And this is now going out to consultation. But the kind of main points that it's looked at are, firstly, how much compensation people should get and how to calculate that compensation. And its kind of preliminary estimates are that 14 million people, or at least 14 million deals could fall under this compensation programme, that it could cost about £11 billion, so about 8 billion in actual compensation, then another £3 billion in running costs, and that each person could receive 700, or at least case could receive £700. Now, as I mentioned, that's not as high as some of the earlier estimates. It could have been in the region of about £900 per person, anywhere from £9 billion to £18 billion. So there are some consumer groups who aren't very happy about this, but it is a balancing act because the FCA also has to ensure that the market still functions, that it doesn't cripple the industry to such an extent that it forces lenders to crash out, which could inadvertently increase the cost of finance. The other thing it was looking at was time limits, and so it's decided to take this back to 2007. And look, some lenders may not have that paperwork. But, you know, as I said, this is a consultation process, and assuming all goes to plan, payments could start coming out the door early next year.
Gurpreet, thank you. And if you want to find out if you've been affected by the car finance mis-selling scandal, then you can scan the QR code on screen now to find out more on our Money blog. But that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in the press preview. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front page of The Guardian. The headline, as you can see, Jenrick accused of fuelling toxic nationalism after race remarks. Theo Usherwood and Jenny Kleeman will join me after the break.